Now, in his opening address at the Third Energy Transition Working Group, Electricity and Energy Minister Dr. Kgosientsho Ramokgopa said, and I quote, "The transition to a low-carbon economy is one of the greatest challenges of our time, and the gathering is a precursor to the Energy Transition Working Group Ministerial meeting." Let's discuss this further now. The Minister joins us live. Minister, good evening to you, and thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for bearing with us. Now, this gathering is key when it comes to shaping the future, for example, of global energy. Now, given the global challenges, particularly of greenhouse gas emissions, millions lacking access to energy, which we'll discuss in just a moment, the world is lacking safe, low carbon and cheap large-scale energy alternatives to fossil fuels. So what is the main focus area?
Well, the issue is that, good evening to you, Bongi, and to the viewers at home. So the intention is that we want to use this platform to canvass, if you like, how we see the transition to unfold. And our view is that it must take into account the domestic nuances of the various jurisdictions, countries across the globe, that there's no single transition. And it's important that in the course of that transition, you leave no one behind. We are able to address issues of energy access. As we know that on the continent, there's about 600 million people who don't have access to electricity. We now know that there's a new front that is confronting us, that electricity is becoming increasingly expensive. And then we also know that you need energy in all its various sources to be able to power any form of industrialization and development. So it's important that when we have a conversation around the kind of transition, the future that we envisage, that we are able to take all of these factors into account and ensure that we allow countries to consider their own domestic nuances on how best they want to transition. Yeah. And we also accept that this transition is going to be exceptionally expensive to finance. So you need to design instruments that will make it possible for especially poor and developing countries to be able to afford the kind of transition that is expected of them. And our view is that the major industrialized powers have got a disproportionate amount of responsibility to assist developing countries in meeting their developmental needs and also ensuring that the transition also allows them an opportunity to be able to develop, broaden the industrial base, get people into employment, introduce new skills that are going to undergird the kind of transition that we are envisaging. So you are absolutely correct that it's a very complex conversation, but it also presents the opportunities going into the future. So we want to use our G20 presidency to be able to elevate those issues that they are confronting the global south, and most importantly, the African continent, because it's got its unique set of circumstances that distinguish itself from other regions of the world. And I think there's a greater levels of appreciation across the board by all the players in the room that Africa requires a special attention as part of the totality of the interventions that we are making for us to be able to effect the kind of transitions that we are envisaging. So that on the back of this transition, we are able to create new opportunities, we are able to uplift people out of conditions of squalor, we are able to broaden the industrial base and also allow countries to exploit their endowments for their own development.
Right on that point, Minister, especially because when one listens to your remarks earlier on, you speak about the fact that, yes, it's true, millions don't have access, but at the same time, when you look at others, they rely on unsafe fuels for cooking. And this evening, for example, a colleague of mine, Mbali Tetani, was in Soweto speaking to a community that's not only crying about access, but they're crying about affordability, which they say is a huge issue for them. And it's all good and well to have these conversations to say you want to deal with these issues, but how do they trickle down to the people like in Orlando, for example, who are saying that electricity is too expensive?
Oh, your observations are on the mark. So remember that in our country, we had multiple fronts. So the major front that was confronting us was that of load shedding. So essentially, our aggregate generation was not sufficient to meet the aggregate demand. So we focused our attention to resolve that problem. And now that we appear to be resolving that problem, and I'm confident that we are within touching distance of putting load shedding behind us, we know that there are other fronts that had not received sufficient attention. What are those? It's about the capacity of the distribution and reticulation infrastructure to meet if you like, the demand. So that's downstream, how you reticulate the electricity. And this as a result of a huge acute underinvestment by municipalities, including ESCOM, on the distribution and reticulation, the inability to make projection with regards to population growth and the associated demand, and that has resulted in what we refer to as load reduction. I've made the point that we are repurposing the grant, what we call the INEP grant, that is meant to provide universal access, so that we design it to provide the necessary infrastructure to allow us to be able to ensure that the demand that is required downstream is satisfied. And then we also accept that another front is that of electricity costs, that if you were to do a trend line over the past 10 years, you have seen that the tariffs have increased by over 600%. It's an untenable situation. Industries are becoming uncompetitive, and also households are finding very difficult to meet the costs associated with electricity, is eroding their disposable income. Now, these conversations that we are having are able to help us to ensure that we bring on board the new technological innovations in the form of solar PV, a hybrid solution, and we are able to provide this intervention, especially your peri-urban areas and also rural communities and villages that are disproportionately affected by the cost of electricity. Because really the primary driver of the tariff is what we call the cost of primary energy. And we know that our primary energy source really is coal. And if you are to replace that with solar, and of course pairing that with PV, you are likely going to bring down the cost of electricity provision, because we have seen that with technological advancement, the cost curve has come down. I'm under no illusion. I mean, solar and PV, that's not base load. So you still need to rely on the ESCOM as a backstop, and of course generating from fossil fuel. So part of the conversations we're having there is to ensure that we retrofit some of these power stations. We're able to introduce technologies that what we call abatement technologies that brings down the emissions level, so that we can continue to benefit from this endowment that is coal without harmful effects to the environment and the health of people who are located close to those coal-fired power stations. So you are going to find that there's going to be that trickle-down effect. In fact, for the record, we will be launching one of the first phases of this technology in Limpopo. We've been doing that over a period of time, but now we're scaling it up. We are going to be a bit more aggressive. There's 1.6 million households that don't have access to electricity. We're going to use these technologies to connect them. And then we'll find solutions to ensure that we bring down the cost in other areas that are already connected.
Now,
and like I said before, we will make that announcement to the public.
So you speak about that one part, but also you touch on the issue of infrastructure. And one wonders, because you have said it repeatedly, even today you said it, that the infrastructure gap needs to be closed and this issue needs to be addressed as speedily as possible. But how do you begin to scale up on that? Because you still have issues around climate and energy financing, and we're seeing some of these countries that should be ramping up these efforts actually dragging their feet. And how then do you begin to push on that in order to be able to achieve this dream?
You know, you're absolutely correct. I think at the global level, you need to introduce instruments that will make it possible for developing countries to make the kind of investments associated with the infrastructure that is required to reticulate and transmit and reticulate this electricity. And that's why part of the conversation there, Bongi, is how are you going to finance this transition? And that's happening in a stream that is led by Minister Godongwana. So we do accept that the balance sheet of developing countries are not sufficient to meet the kind of capital investment that are required to be able to achieve the level of ambition that we have. But if we are to take it to the South African context, we are not necessarily sitting with a money problem. So we are sitting with spending efficiency and the issues of designing and determining our priorities. I mean, for an example, we are sitting with an annual allocation of 4 billion rand for this universal access, this INEP grant. There's also some money that is set aside, is a grant that is meant to support the rollout of solar water geysers. There's also an allocation that sits somewhere driven by National Treasury that is meant to roll out smart meters. So what we are advocating for is that we must redesign this grant architecture. Instead of having disparate grants sitting all over the place, you are going to aggregate those so that you benefit from the economies of scale, ensure that there's efficiency in spending, ensure that there's efficiency in your allocation, and you are going to undermine leakage. And in so doing, we are confident that we should be able to meet the kind of demands that are required for us to replenish, maintain, and refurbish the reticulation infrastructure.
So, Minister,
so in our context, you are not sitting with a money problem, you are sitting with a spending problem.
Pardon me, I want to come in right on that point because it's a critical one, right? So one would then ask, how far do you then go in ensuring that municipalities themselves are also ready here? Because we've also seen this as an issue as well when it comes to, you think about grants, for example, in some cases, and as you say, there must be spending efficiencies, and they are the coalface when it comes to delivery of services for people, because people will just see this as a municipality, I need to get services, I don't care what they can and cannot provide, because some people would then look at it like that. So how do you begin to capacitate them in order to make sure that they also do what you've just said?
Oh, you're absolutely correct. So in many municipalities, they don't have the kind of technical skills that are required to be able to design and prosecute a program of this magnitude. So as part of the redesigning of that grant architecture, is the delivery mechanism. So we put in together a project management unit where we are going to aggregate, if you like, the type of skills that are required for purposes of rolling out this infrastructure. And it's going to provide, if you like, a shared services function. So I'm not going to locate those skills at the level of municipalities. They'll sit at the central place so that we have a better aerial view of the requirements for investment, and we're able to dispatch these skills to be able to roll out this infrastructure. And the second issue I'm raising, which is very important, is the part of households or consumers, because it goes beyond households, even businesses, to also appreciate that they've got an obligation to pay for the services that are being rendered. And as part of rolling out this infrastructure, we'll roll out a platform of smart meters that allows us an opportunity to do a multiplicity of things. First is to ensure that there's accurate billing, there's precise billing, and there's a user pay, if you like, a principle, because it's a prepaid arrangement. But we're also able to cater for poor households, those indigent households that are earning below a particular threshold that entitles them to free basic electricity. Instead of giving that money in the form of a grant to municipalities, this technology platform allows us to provide it to each and every household that has got a smart meter, so we're able to upload that meter at the beginning of each and every month, and they can have the benefit of free basic electricity. But it also gives us an opportunity to be able to execute credit control, those who are delinquent, and I'm talking about those who can afford to pay but choose not to pay. Then you are able to effect credit control and drive them towards ensuring that they meet their obligations. So there's a platform there's a technology platform that allows us to do this, but it also helps us going into the future to do demand side management. I mean, the highest consumption at the household level is your geysers. As I speak to you and many viewers, those who switch on now, the geysers are running, they're consuming a lot of electricity. So it gives you an opportunity to remotely connect and disconnect the geysers as an example, and you are able to bring down consumption, and by definition you bring down the cost of electricity, but also it frees up the grid, and we are able to support the industry. So it's able to give us that flexibility on how we're able to support the grid and make it stable. So it's got a number of benefits, but the point I'm making is that there is the efficiency of spending, the efficiency of allocation, the efficiency of spending, and getting the right skills in place to be able to roll out this kind of intervention. And I must say that we've already canvassed it with municipalities and SALGA, so we're moving in that direction. And that's why I'm saying that I am confident that load reduction will be something of the past. Of course, it's going to take us a bit of time. We'll announce how we're going to roll it out, moving from one village to the other, one township to the other, one suburb to the other, and this will be a thing of the past, because a lot of people can't relate with the fact that there's no load shedding, and yet they're experiencing load reduction.
Yeah, and some of them, of course, when they would have bought, for example, prepaid electricity, and then you still don't have access, they don't understand it. And I suppose it's also the issue of, the indigent registers when it comes to some of these municipalities. But I'm going to let you park that for a second so that you can outline it when you and I speak in future about how you're going to deal with all of this. But before I let you go, can I put you in a little corner there? There's reports that are suggesting that the African Development Bank has signed a $474.6 million loan agreement with South Africa to support the implementation of the country's just energy transition. Is that correct?
Well, the recipient of that will be National Treasury. As and when they accept the terms and conditions, they'll make it available to us as a spending department. But really, the authority is National Treasury. Of course, we can do with all types of support, but I want to go back to the point I've made. We are not, as I speak to you now, sitting with a money problem. We are sitting with a spending problem. So the little that we have on the table, let us spend it wisely, let us spend it efficiently before we load into the kitty additional money, when in fact we know that there's leakage. So let's stop the leakage. Let's make sure that we've got the right skills properly deployed, ensure that there's proper planning, and we're able to execute efficiently. As and when we need additional resources, we'll call on those resources. Otherwise, it's a bottomless pit. So the money will come, but you will not be able to see the results. And that's why we are transfixed on ensuring that we're able to design an outfit that is prolific and efficient in its delivery, and the impact can be seen by ordinary men and women on the ground. And that's how we're going to address the challenges of energy poverty, electricity inequality in our country, Bonnie.
So you owe me part 2 of this conversation, because we'd like to then know how are you going to deal with the issue of those illegal connections, as you say, that now even the issue of load reduction, when you outline the plans there, let's talk further about them as soon as you've made them available. But Minister, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. That was the Electricity and Energy Minister, Dr. Kgosientsho Ramokgopa.